Yo, what's up guys, hope you guys are doing good. So today we are going to see what if Naruto become one of 7 swordsmen and met with Yugao on his journey part 1. Hope you will enjoy this video. So before we start, please like the video and subscribe to our channel and hit bell notification. It motivates me to upload more fanfics for my lovely audience. So let's get started. Waltzing side by side with his sensei and master over the last 4 years, he dug his hands deep into his pockets and walked with his eyes glued to the ground. It was all the same as before, the same atmosphere, the same people, just older. Well, there was one exception. Ba-chan had gotten her face right next to his dad's on the Hokage monument. "You okay, Gaki? Thought you'd be happier about finally being back home." The words shook him out of his trance, so he looked back with a surprised gaze. Smirking lightly, he tilted his head back to look at the blue skies above them. "I am Jiraiya sensei, don't get me wrong, but I'm not looking forward to getting yelled at." "Why would you get yelled at?" Jiraiya suddenly asked. The question came after a few seconds, and he looked over with a questioning gaze. "Aside from being over a year late," Naruto countered, raising a brow at the old sage. A nervous gulp was heard beside him, before his response came. "Well, we had work to do. You wouldn't have gotten so strong without the extra time. I'm sure when Heim sees our results, she'll forgive you in a heartbeat." Snorting at his mentor's words, Naruto ran a hand through his golden locks. "Perhaps, if we are so lucky to get a word in before she punches the both of us to see Gaara, that is. You could stop her punch in a heartbeat. Where's the fun in that?" Naruto chuckled sheepishly. Something would never change. Shaking his head, Jiraiya clapped his pupil on the back. "You don't even have to catch it. Just flash a seducing smile in those new clothes of yours and she'll be on cloud 9. Looking down at his clothes, Naruto smirked again at the memory. He was wearing black cargo pants, a white high-collared sleeveless shirt, a haori with 2 different patterns, one solid red and one geometrically patterned with green, orange, and yellow, and lastly forearm guards that were mostly worn by the Anbu. His hair had grown longer too, so he had been tempted to start putting it up into a small ponytail. Not that it would look like a ponytail since it was so spiky, but it would be more comfortable and practical that way. Jiraiya had promised him back in the day that if he got a more acceptable wardrobe, he would teach him some useful stuff. Saying this outfit was acceptable enough would be a huge understatement. "She's old enough to be my grandma," Naruto commented after some time. "Well, she doesn't look like it." "Touché," Naruto groaned while shaking his head again. Suddenly grinning his usual perverted grin, Jiraiya moved behind his pupil and placed his larger hands on the younger male's shoulders and turned his head around. "Just look at all those intriguing female figures looking your way. I bet they wouldn't say no to a tour to the Shack Motel." Looking around him, Naruto took in all the glances and hidden giggles that were directed at him and blushed a mild pink. "Don't be ridiculous. I have more important stuff to focus on than getting every STD there is," Naruto grumbled while looking at the ground, and pushed Jiraiya's hands off him. Jiraiya sighed loudly, and smacked Naruto's lightly. "Ungrateful Gaki. You got the gift to seduce such fine women by merely being in their presence. And you don't use it at all. Well, perhaps you would have more luck if you started thinking of them as real humans, and not as your next book subjects." Naruto yelled back with a twitching eyebrow and a fist clenched so hard that his knuckles became white. Gulping slightly at the threatening display, Jiraiya backed off, holding his hands up. "Easy there. We don't want another episode in the middle of the village." Groaning louder than before while smacking his forehead, Naruto looked out of the corner of his eyes. "I haven't had an episode the last 2 years. Plus, I won't have them anymore." "Why?" "Because you and that big ball of hatred inside you have become best buddies." Jiraiya countered with a snort, folding his arms across his chest. "No, but we've come to an agreement." Jiraiya rubbed his temples, and reached over to squeeze the blonde's shoulder. "You can't just take its word for it. It has a name, and of course not. I'm not dumb enough to let my guard down like that." Comes from the guy being so blonde he almost walked into a wall a few miles back. "Can you just shut up and walk, Ero Sennin?" Naruto suddenly yelled out and punched the Sannin on the shoulder, almost sending the older shinobi crashing to the ground if he hadn't caught his footing first. Gritting his teeth, Jiraiya roared out as well. stop being a brat. You're making a scene. Oh, so I'm making a scene. Naruto yelled back, grabbing Jiraiya's Haori while the Sannin grabbed onto the blonde's hair, both looking with death glares at the other. Naruto. The two suddenly stopped as a feminine yet familiar voice hit their ears. Turning their heads, keeping their respective grip on the other, they came eye to eye with a family kunoichi with pink hair. Sakura? Naruto asked while the student and teacher let go of each other. Unable to believe his eyes, Naruto looked surprised at her. Out of all people they were to meet here on the streets of Konoha, it was his old teammate. She had grown, being both taller and looking more mature than she did 4 years ago. How long has it been? It feels like ages since I last saw you. Wow, you've gotten tall, she blurted out, standing right in front of him while measuring their heights with her hand. Shaking his head with a chuckle, Naruto pulled her hand down. It has been what, 4 years now? And yeah, I suppose eating something else than ramen did do quite the change, he replied cheekily. You're quite right about that, it wasn't a healthy habit at all. And as I studied the human anatomy under Tsunade-sama, I figured that was what had stopped your supposed growth rate. Sakura remarked while giggling into her hand. I suppose you can study it more on my dead body, because as you know, we're quite late. So two potential outcomes are that Ba-chan either punches as Tsuna or uses her medical ninjutsu to chop our heads off, the blonde replied with a shiver, feeling a bit hesitant about going up to the Hokage's office. Shaking her head, Sakura gave a light punch to the blonde's shoulder. Yeah, but she has missed you a lot. Just make a good and respectful return to her office, and I'll guarantee you won't be a corpse. She sighed, stressing on the word respectful. I can be respectful. Peef. Sure. Jiraiya suddenly commented, and Naruto looked back at the old man with his eyes flashing red for a second. You're pushing me toward making the scene, sensei, Naruto replied in a whisper, and the toad sage quickly moved in and dusted the blonde's shoulder off with a nervous stare at the people around them. Now, no need to get you arrested by the Anbu on your first day back. That damn scene put that entire village we were in under lockdown the last time, so don't you dare cause panic here, Jiraiya replied harshly, making Sakura look at them confused, unable to get this reference. Relax sensei, I was only kidding, but if you keep pushing my buttons I'll take that risk, Naruto threatened with a smirk, making the old man sigh with utter regret of ever teaching Naruto how to create the technique. Hearing a soft giggle from the pinkett, the duo looked at her as she shook her head slowly side to side, her pink locks following with her. You two are as bickering as ever. Only because this senile old man thinks it's a good idea to mess with me. Naruto chuckled, glaring out of the corner of his eyes at the white-haired toad sage, that looked back at him with a murderous glare. Shifting uncomfortably on her feet, Sakura tugged on Naruto's jacket with a minor glare. Hey now, I don't think it's a good idea to piss off one of the Sannin. Peef. I can take him. I thought you said you could show respect. Sakura yelled with a throbbing tick mark on her forehead while sending a punch flying to Naruto's head. But no explosion was heard, or cry of pain. On the contrary, the sound of Sakura's mumbling unformulated sentences made Jiraiya smirk as he looked at his student who had effortlessly captured the pink-haired girl's fist in the palm of his hand. You've learned Ba-chan's monstrous strength technique. Impressive. Naruto commented with a big smile. How did you? Sakura stuttered out, retrieving her hand while looking at Naruto who just dug his right back into his pocket. Jiraiya took this as his cue, and swung an arm over the tall blonde's shoulders. I trained him to be the best, that's how. Yeah, I suppose you did. But Sakura, I really would appreciate it if you didn't try using me as a punching bag anymore, it got old long ago. Taking a step back, looking at the blonde like he grew a second head, Sakura tilted her head trying to find some kind of response. You've really changed Naruto, it looks like you finally grew up. What's that supposed to mean? Naruto asked with a raised eyebrow. Sakura found herself unable to let out a soft laugh as she pointed a finger at him. Oh, let's see, there are so many scenarios to choose from, like that time where you ruined a mission by farting. Arguing with Sandaime-sama over our missions. Threatening to skin Tora alive in front of the fire daimyo's wife. I get it. You wouldn't if I hadn't taken my sweet time to teach you some manners and discipline. Jiraiya smirked, deciding to add his own 2 cents. You speak about avoiding a scene, but you keep provoking me, sensei, Naruto growled lowly, looking back at his mentor who got that fearful look again. As this happened, Sakura looked on with her interest piqued. What happened to make Jiraiya this fearful of Naruto getting angry? How strong did you become, Naruto? Could you really take on Jiraiya-sama and win? The questions flew around her head, as she watched the two bicker again. Weren't you two already late enough? She suddenly managed to speak out, and the two stopped and looked at her. Naruto somehow found this laughable, and chuckled loudly. Indeed we are, any more late and she'll send us flying through the wall, all the way around the nations until we crash right back through her window. Don't jinx it, Gaki, we need to get a move on. Jiraiya yelled out and started leaping through the rooftops, leaving Naruto to stand with Sakura. Shouldn't you go after him? She asked curiously, while Naruto just shrugged an answer. Tilting his head to look at her, he smirked, I'd rather not be on the receiving end of her anger yet. It's only going to get worse if you stay away, she's really been missing you. Sakura smiled, as the two started to walk toward the Hokage tower at a high tempo. Sighing and rubbing his head, Naruto closed his eyes. Yeah, I know, but I needed some extra time. For what? Your change of wardrobe. It looks good on you, it seems fitting somehow. What? This thing. Oh, Jiraiya-sensei told me he would teach me something useful if I changed into an outfit that wouldn't scare his research material away, and this is what I ended up in. He says it has the opposite effect now, like I'm a magnet attracting them. Naruto explained, a small smile forming on his lips. Sakura giggled at that and lightly jabbed his arm. You're really dense if you can't see it, look at all these girls and even women turning their heads to look at you. Yeah, until the point they realize who I am. Shaking her head, Sakura looked around the people watching them. You've never given up on gaining their recognition, why'd give up now? Frankly, because I don't care anymore. I don't need the civilians' approval to become a good shinobi. Some people are blinded by the past, and while I find it really annoying that they blame me, I learned to look the other way and ignore it. The blonde tried explaining, a tired tone coming out with his words. But you said you wanted to become Hokage, right? You need the people to be with you for that. Sakura retorted with a frown. That is what I wanted, yes, but not anymore. Why not? She asked, surprised, her eyebrows flying to the top of her forehead. Naruto took his time to answer, and started out with a small sigh. I have new goals that requires me not to be stuck in an office doing paperwork, but if I finish this mission earlier than expected, I suppose I could give it a new shot. New goals? Sakura asked, her interest now piqued more than before. Chuckling, Naruto bumped his elbow against Sakura's arm as they arrived at the Hokage's tower. That's a story for another time. You wouldn't get it without context, and that would take too long to explain now, and I'm already late. I see. Well, I have to be at the hospital for my shift in a few minutes, so I guess I'll see you later. I suppose we could catch up over some ramen if you want. Sakura asked, a mild pink blush forming on her cheeks. Ramen. After all this talk of bad habits. Naruto joked lightly, but it earned an enraged Sakura punching his arm roughly. Way to ruin the mood, idiot, she sighed while walking off, leaving Naruto to stare at her back before shrugging and opening the door to walk inside. Slowly walking up the stairs with his hands buried in his pockets, he tried imagining how the scenario was going to play out. Eventually figuring out that he would either have to dodge a few punches or take one in the face, he sighed and stood beside the Hokage's door. About to knock on the door, he suddenly heard intense yelling from the inside and took a step back as he watched his mentor fly through the door, and then through the wall beside him. Raising an amused eyebrow, Naruto looked out of the hole and watched the perverted sage fly into the distance. Huh, at this speed he might actually reach Suna sooner than expected. Chuckling to himself, Naruto stood straight up and knocked on the broken door before entering, and looking at the back of the female Sannin, and God, I'm Hokage with a small smile. Going to punch me to Suna too, Ba-chan. Freezing in her step, Tsunade slowly turned around and stared at the one daring to call her Ba-chan. Her eyes widened as she saw him, taller and more muscular than when he left, stood her precious knucklehead, smiling at her for the first time in 4 years. Giving into a leap, she grabbed the front of his jacket, making Naruto gulp. I guess I'm going to see Gaara sooner than expected. He winced and closed his eyes, waiting for the punch to hit him. But when he, instead of feeling a stinging pain to his head and the air flying through his hair, he felt a comfortable warmth, so he opened his eyes and noticed he had been grabbed into a bone-crushing hug instead. You're late, Gaki, she whispered in his ear, clutching onto him as the blonde raised a surprised brow but returned the warm hug nonetheless. Yeah, but we were quite busy. It wasn't for nothing, I promise, Naruto said in a whisper too, as he hugged Tsunade. Hearing a pained groaning from behind them, the two broke the hug and looked toward the hole in the wall Jiraiya started to crawl through. He gets a hug, but I get a fist to the face. How was Gaara? Naruto suddenly asked, and Jiraiya just laughed sarcastically. Ha, very funny. Tsunade snorted at the old pervert, and moved down to sit in her chair. So, now that all of us are assembled, I would like to welcome you home, Naruto, and I would also like an explanation as to why you are so late. Let's just say, his training has proven fruitful. Who knew that under the shell of the former orange-clad Gaki was a prodigy beyond Sasuke Uchiha? Jiraiya shrugged with a large smirk, crossing his hands over his chest as he looked proudly at the blonde. I see. So, how strong is he? Tsunade asked, looking at Naruto casually inspecting the village by looking out over the village from the window in her office. Jiraiya chuckled a bit and pointed at him with a thumb. Let's just say, if we fought I'd lose. Tsunade roared out laughing, making the two males look at her funnily. Realizing that she was the only one laughing at this, she stopped and looked at them like they told her Iwa wanted an arranged marriage between Naruto and the Tsuchikage's granddaughter. You're serious? How is that possible? She yelled out, standing up from her chair with her fists on her desk. Well, I decided to, get your hands out of your ass. Yes. Naruto finished, and Jiraiya scowled with a throbbing tick mark. Looking back to Tsunade from Naruto, Jiraiya sighed heavily. Yes, that doesn't explain much. What could possibly make him stronger than a Sannin in just a small 4 years? Tsunade asked while her surprise and outrage had yet to quiet down as she slumped back into her chair. Naruto has a lot of perks, let's just leave it like that. The easiest way to explain it before it gets dark is that he's an Uzumaki and got the Kyuubi, both allowing him to regenerate over 100 times faster than you and I, so he's able to train more and harder with added benefits. Plus, with his massive chakra pools, he can train with shadow clones. In essence, we speed up his training with hundreds of clones a day, making the gain of training resembling more that of 2 lifetimes, instead of 4 years, if my calculations are right. Jiraiya tried to explain, but it just caused Tsunade to have a headache and a pang of hunger for some sake to calm it. If you had to put that in simple terms, where is he between low-level genin and the old man? Tsunade asked again, and Jiraiya looked deep in thought. Well, he obviously isn't a match for the old man in his prime, because he was damn near unbeatable back then, but in his old stage. I think Naruto could give him a pretty good fight, thus leaving him as a prime candidate for fighting people like Orochimaru. Jiraiya thought out loud, making Tsunade open her desk and pull out a bottle of sake. Sighing, she poured herself a cup, and downed it in one go. This is too much an outrageous claim for me to simply take it by the word. No offense, Naruto. None taken. The blonde shrugged, causing her to raise a brow at him. Smiling a bit, she poured a second cup, and slid it across the table to the blonde with a calculating gaze. You seem so much more mature, it makes me wonder what the pervert did to you. As I told Sakura, I beat manners and discipline into him. Jiraiya burst out, his face pouting as he looked at the sake, wanting a cup himself. Learning manners. From you, Tsunade said out loud, looking between the two before she snorted. Yeah, right. He's not exactly wrong, Ba-chan, as much as I hate to admit it. The tough training did bring out some of it to me, but I wouldn't say that Ero Sennin deserves all the honor. Yeah, right. I brought out all of it. Hush, you old pervert. I'm speaking with Naruto now. Tsunade shushed, causing Jiraiya to fall face first onto the floor in surprise. Downing his cup of sake slowly, groaning a bit at the burning sensation going down his throat along with the liquid, Naruto chuckled, you were saying something about not just taking our word for it. Nodding her head, Tsunade crossed her arms under her bust, making Jiraiya giggle a bit at the sight. Right, I need to see some first-hand evidence and proof of this. A spar between you and one of our strongest Junin should suffice. Challenge accepted. So, who is the poor fella? Guy, Asuma, or even Kurenai? Naruto asked with a small smirk, mentioning the first names coming to his mind until he heard the window open. Ma, it hurts my heart that I wasn't one of the first ones mentioned, Naruto. The voice was familiar and made Naruto smile brightly as he turned his head and looked at his Junin sensei entering through the window, his usual eye smile present as he waved. Standing up from his chair, Naruto walked over and chuckled lightly. Well, we saved the best for last, isn't that right, Kakashi-sensei? Chuckling as well, Kakashi scratched his cheek with his finger. I suppose that's right. It's good to see you, sensei. You've been missed, Naruto admitted, grinning a bit sheepishly, while first bumping with his sensei. Looking quite curiously at his student, Kakashi tilted his head. I can't put my finger on why, but while you seem the same, you also seem different. Well, aside from the wardrobe change, which is definitely a new but good thing. Finding herself giggling a bit at the mention, Tsunade nodded, agreed. Why is everyone praising my wardrobe change so much? Naruto asked, raising a brow, looking between the three older adults in the room. Shaking his head with a long sigh, Jiraiya clapped Naruto on the back. Sorry to be so brutally honest, but in that hideous orange jumpsuit, you stuck out more than a water user in Suna would. Deciding to save his student from this talk, Kakashi smiled again. Anyhow, it's good to see you too, Naruto. I'm looking forward to seeing where your training brought you. Hope you weren't slacking. Peef, as if that kid could slack at all, the Toad Sage snorted with a smirk, looking mischievously smug. Finding this amusing, Tsunade looked back to Jiraiya from her seat behind her desk and asked, what do you mean? Jiraiya's smug face fell, as he looked back to the busty Hokage and smirked. Contrary to popular belief, it was this blonde brat that woke me up at 5 o'clock, every morning, at the same time every day. To train. Some days when we got to bed late, I had to send a shadow clone in my place in the morning so he could train because I was so damn exhausted. He's like an overcharged battery. As Jiraiya finished his rant, everybody looked back at Naruto, who just stood with a minor embarrassed look as he scratched the back of his head. Oops. Rubbing the bridge of her nose, Tsunade sighed loudly. Alright, so, I want a battle between you and Kakashi to test your strength, Naruto. But, for now, I think it's about time you go and say hello to your friends and catch up with them. I'll entertain the old pervert in the meantime. Oh, shut up, it's not like that. Tsunade glared, making Jiraiya slump over. Naruto chuckled at the rejected look on his mentor's face but nodded at the Godime Hokage. Alright, but when is this fight happening? Sundown, at your team's training ground. Kakashi and Sakura will be there. I want to test your fighting capabilities along with your ability to function in a team after being away for so long. Was the answer he got, and with a simple shrug, and afterward nodded and shunshined out of the room. Walking side by side with his sensei, Naruto gazed up at the older man and raised a brow at the book he was holding. Still reading the same old book, sensei? Kakashi hummed and looked at him from the corner of his eye, and chuckled. Well, there hasn't been a release in years due to you taking all Jiraiya-sama's time. Smirking, Naruto pulled open his haori and reached in, but it was not what he was reaching for that suddenly caught Kakashi's attention. Grabbing the blonde's haori and pulling it more to the side, his eyebrow rose at the sight of a sword sheath, and the brown and black handle of a katana sticking out. Kenjutsu. Pulling a book out of his haori, Naruto sighed and held it in his hand. Yes, Jiraiya took me to Uzushio on our 3rd year, and told me about my mother's origins. This statement made Kakashi take a step back, letting go of Naruto's haori while looking at him with wide eyes. Why, you know about them now? Naruto gave a short chuckle and crossed his arms, looking at the ground with a small frown. Yeah, he told me about my dad as well, and I'm not holding any grudges against you, sensei. I know you were just following orders. I wanted to tell you, I really did. You don't have to explain yourself. Jiraiya sensei made it all very clear to me. I was mad at the beginning, and I might have lost my cool in the middle of a town, but I'm fine now. Naruto explained, waving his hands in front of him. Kakashi sighed with relief, his tense composure dropping as he leaned against a fence. I guess I can finally tell you about them then. I'd like that. Jiraiya-sensei told me a lot, but you were my dad's prized student, so you must know a lot about them too. Naruto smiled softly, leaning in beside his sensei as they watched people pass. I will later, but I'm still curious about that sword, Kakashi admitted, peeking at the hilt of the blade sticking lightly out from the blonde's haori. Giving a nod, the blonde pulled lightly on the hilt, unsheathing a few inches to reveal the black blade with a dark blue edge. When in Uzushio, sensei told me a lot about my clan's history, their ability to use fuinjutsu, and we eventually got to talk about my mother, and her skills, including her use of swords. So I got a burning desire to learn how to use the sword. It was a tough time, but it was worth it. So, what do you know of techniques? Trying to figure all my tricks out before our little spar, sensei? Naruto asked, smirking, making the Junin chuckle. Kakashi shook his head, and took a seat on a nearby bench, merely trying to catch up. And I already know you can use that sword of yours, what does a little more information hurt? Smirking a little wider with closed eyes, Naruto sits down beside his Genin team sensei. I suppose it won't matter even if you do know, I'll still win. Getting cocky. Huh, I'm confident in my abilities, but not cocky, Naruto stated simply, making Kakashi simply nod in response. Closing his book, and putting it into his shuriken pouch, Kakashi smiled, so. Well, there were some notes my mother had collected or written herself, I don't really know, we came back a year ago and found them and got out again, Naruto said, enjoying the overly surprised expression on Kakashi's mask-covered face. You were back in a short period of time. And you didn't even come to say hello, I'm hurt. Snorting, Naruto rested back against the bench. Relax, sensei, we were there for about an hour, collecting scrolls and notes and putting them together with the stuff we found in the ruins of Uzushio. Still, you could have dropped by. Kakashi sighed and rested back as well. I suppose, but at the time we were still busy going after some leads on Orochimaru's whereabouts, we just quickly got in and out, not even Ba-chan knew we were back, and I'd like it to stay that way, she'll kill me if she finds out. Naruto shivered, feeling utterly terrified at the memories of an angry Tsunade. Kakashi gave a short laugh and seemed to be smirking. If you truly did become as strong as Jiraiya-sama says, I doubt you'd have such a hard time defending yourself. Jiraiya-sensei did work me really hard, and I asked for it every day, as he said. In the beginning, it was all about becoming strong enough to get Sasuke back, but then stuff happened around us and my horizon was widened severely. Naruto commented, scowling at the memories. Did something bad happen on the road? Kakashi asked with mild concern, keeping an eye on the blonde from the corner of his uncovered eye. Naruto started frowning, and looked up at the sky. A group of bandits decided to raid a village we were staying in at our first stop after we left. We stopped them, of course, but the damage had already been done. Fire and pillars of smoke rose to the sky as he stood on top of the hotel's roof. Screaming and the sound of death hit their ears, as they watched the massacre. We need to stop this endless bloodshed. Naruto looked back up at his mentor and nodded, grabbing onto a kunai as they leapt down from the roof. The fighting was easy, they were only bandits, but that didn't change the fact that for the first time in his life, blood covered his hands. The thug's body had just dropped before his eyes, and onto the ground, the man's body going limp as his breathing stopped while the blood ran down Naruto's kunai and onto his hands and fingers, soaking them in the crimson liquid. Help me. The scream hit his ears, the sounds muffled as his view looked groggy. Turning his head slowly, his field of view almost spinning as he looked at a woman dragged away by her hair, before a dagger was pushed through her neck. Her blood sprayed out of her neck, covering his face as he looked on for a few seconds before he started puking on the ground. As he was kneeling on the ground, emptying his stomach for his dinner from earlier, a kick was sent to his chest and he rolled across the street. Growling, he looked up from the ground, damning himself to hell for losing his cold against a mere thug, the horror and pain from taking a man's life still rushing through him, rendering his usual unbeatable resolve useless. You killed Ryujin. You'll pay for that. But before the man could finish, a kunai was struck to his head, and Jiraiya landed in front of him. Throwing the blonde across his shoulder, Jiraiya leapt onto a nearby rooftop and placed the blonde on the ground. You okay, Gaki? What happened? He's dead, that man, I killed him. Naruto whispered, the scene playing over and over before his eyes. Creating a dozen shadow clones to end this raid, Jiraiya turned around and placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder. Naruto. And that woman, if I hadn't frozen up, she wouldn't be dead, her blood is all over my face. Naruto kept on, wiping his forehead to see the crimson liquid staining his sleeve, making him feel like throwing up again. Why are people this evil? Why do they do this? Greed. Kid, greed. The last thing I knew, I woke up and couldn't remember anything after. Jiraiya sensei must have washed me up because I was clean and in fresh clothes, but this feeling of dry blood in my hands, it wouldn't go away. Naruto muttered, looking at his hands with a frown. Kakashi felt sorry for his poor student, and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. I'm both sorry and happy it happened. You had to take a life sooner or later with this line of work, but I'm sorry about the woman and all. Jiraiya sensei told me something similar back then, I'm still feeling it now, but I guess I learned how to live with it. Naruto groaned, clenching his fists and leaning back. Shaking his head, Kakashi decided to change the topic. Back to our original conversation though, how does this tie up with you training for something else than bringing back our lost teammate? I hated what happened so bad, that my resolve changed. While I still wanted to bring Sasuke back to the village, my hatred for such people just kept growing as we traveled. I wanted to end such corruption, and I still do, so I trained harder and fought harder than I ever have. So I can try erasing all that evil. Kakashi closed his eyes with a tired sigh, not trying to kill your resolve, but you do know that people like those appear like weeds in a garden, right? Nodding, Naruto surprisingly gave a small smirk. Despite how much I want them gone for good, their existence gives me a reason to keep on fighting. Even when all my other goals are accomplished, there will still be people worthy of being punished. Seems like you got a job for a lifetime then, that's good. Need a job to pay your bills and get food. Kakashi commented, making Naruto only nod in return. Yeah, got bills to pay and a mouth to feed, so ain't no rest for the wicked, right? Naruto commented back cheekily. I'm glad you haven't completely changed, you seem so much more calm and mature now, made me wonder what Jiraiya-sama did to you, but I guess hard training and those experiences caused it, Kakashi replied, grunting as he stood up from the bench. After my first kill I had a bad time, it made me open my eyes on a lot of fronts, and I found out that life was about more than fancy techniques, and having fun. I had to get a grip of myself and grow up, I didn't have time to behave like a kid anymore. Naruto smiled back and stood beside his sensei, dusting his haori off. Nodding, Kakashi looked at the book Naruto had been holding throughout this entire storytime. What's that, by the way? I never got to ask earlier. This thing. Oh yeah, you talked about nothing new being released in all those years, but he did make a new book that has yet to come out. It's yours if you want it. I've already read it, so no point in me keeping it. Naruto chuckled, holding up the book. Kakashi all but snatched the book out of his hand, opening the book as lights seemed to glow out of it before he closed it. You read these books now. Don't tell Ba-chan, it'll only give her about 1,000 more reasons to punch me over to Suna and say hello to Gaara. Naruto sweat dropped, shivering again at the thought. Grabbing onto Naruto's wrist, Kakashi giggled with a perverted glance. I got all the other versions of Ika Ika at home. If you haven't read them all yet, we know what to pass time with before our spar. I'm so proud at least one of my students decided to get lost on this road of life with me. Kakashi all but yelled with glee and tears of happiness while dragging Naruto with him. Oi, relax sensei, it's not like I'm going anywhere. You had no right to tell him about his heritage without consulting me first, Jiraiya. Tsunade roared and slammed her fists onto her desk, cracking the wood. Jiraiya sweated nervously, and took a step back as he looked at the royally pissed off slug Sannin. Would you rather have me tell him before or after he was strong enough to rush back here in a day from Kumo, and set everything on fire? Don't be ridiculous, you old fart. Naruto loves this place, it's his home. Tsunade argued back, her temper showing greatly in the form of a large throbbing tick mark on her forehead. Jiraiya snorted and leaned against the wall with a huff. Don't lecture me about how he would react, I was there. And I seem to remember fairly clearly that he was beyond pissed off. Sighing loudly, Tsunade banged her head against her desk. You should have at least sent a messenger toad to let me know. This changes a ton on shit, Jiraiya. He got a lot of things that need to be delivered back to him. The elders are going to go crazy, and all that damn paperwork from transferring his parents' belongings out of storage and into his custody. Look on the bright side, Heim. Instead of fighting off a very angry, pissed off blonde brat, capable of beating me, with all the village's strength, you only have to sign the same line on a couple of papers. Jiraiya tried to argue back but instead got a book in his face. That doesn't change the fact that you went beyond your authority, and told the Jinchuriki S-class secrets, without permission. I'm still fairly certain that avoiding a crisis with S-rank Naruto was a much better alternative than getting a mouthful right now, Jiraiya mumbled, rubbing his sore nose. Tsunade sat up with a groan and rested her head back against her chair as she took a large sip of her open sake bottle. Are you really so certain that he is stronger than us, and even S-rank already? We went all out in a sealed-off area a month ago, and he beat me with minor injuries after I entered Sage mode, Jiraiya admitted shamefully, almost regretting making his student so strong. Oh, don't look so full of self-pity. You trained the strongest shinobi in the village, you should be proud of yourself and him. Tsunade snorted, downing the entire bottle to calm her headache. Sighing tiredly, Jiraiya sat down, putting the Toad Summoner scroll down on the ground beside him. I know, and I am, trust me. I'm just feeling like there is nothing left for me to teach him. He absorbed everything like a sponge, and I'm utterly lost for new things to teach him. Chakra affinity. Oh, don't sell me so short, Heim. I made him test his affinity the first year, and had him basically master it by the end of it. Jiraiya laughed, enjoying the shocked and unbelieving look on Tsunade's face. Looking sadly into her empty sake bottle, she threw it onto the ground with a sigh. This shadow clone trick, it really did wonders, huh? Tsunade said, more of a statement than a question. It sure did. 1 week of training multiplied with the number of clones and time we used, probably resembled a gain of maybe 1 or 2 years of training, Jiraiya said in a whisper, a large smirk on his face. Nodding, Tsunade gave a small smirk herself. I'm glad you decided to take his training seriously. We can't afford to have him any less strong than he is now, not with the threat of Orochimaru and the Akatsuki looming around in the shadows. So, what affinity did he have? Jiraiya blinked before answering, surprisingly enough, water. Water. I would have thought he'd have wind or lightning, but water. That was Kushina's second affinity if I'm not remembering wrong. Tsunade mused. You aren't remembering wrong, it was her second affinity. And despite how small of a chance he had of getting it, he did, but that didn't stop me from teaching him a bit of some of the other elements. He hasn't mastered them to the same extent though, because we focused a ton on control, and physical strength too. Jiraiya explained. What about the Kyuubi? You had any time to teach him how to control its chakra? Tsunade asked. Her interest suddenly piqued as Jiraiya chuckled with a sigh following after. Yeah, about the Kyuubi. Hokage's office. Really? He learned to control it to that degree? Tsunade asked with like skepticism. Jiraiya nodded proudly, comically inspecting his nails as he leaned against the wall. Yes, after getting a deal through with the furball, he learned how to control the amount of chakra he was gifted to him from the angry ass. I'm still not thrilled about him having struck a deal with the Kyuubi of all things, but it's reassuring that the seal is still the same as ever. Tsunade sighed, rubbing her forehead. Jiraiya gave a short nod. As I said, Heim, the only thing that changed was the loudmouth fox agreeing to willingly let Naruto a portion of chakra, in exchange for sharing his senses and vision. Chuckling lightly at the mention, Tsunade leaned back into her chair, so the fox was desperate enough for a change of scenery that he willingly let his chakra be borrowed by Naruto. Yeah, comical, isn't it? Jiraiya snickered. Rubbing her head, Tsunade sighed. I still want his seal checked every time you're in town. We might have faith in Minato's seal, but it's a cunning fox we are dealing with. Yes, of course, and I'm keeping a close eye on him at all times, but so far he seems completely in control. and is learning quite a handful of useful things to do with the fox's chakra, without relying on it for his own strength. Nodding her head, Tsunade looked a bit excited. Like what? Oh, you'll see very soon. Inside Kakashi's living room, Naruto looked at the books in front of him with wide eyes. I never knew he had released this many, Naruto mumbled with amazement, not being able to truly process the 2 boxes filled with reading material written by his mentor. Kakashi, who was laying on his couch, raised a brow, and pulled the book away from his face. His most popular works are from his main story branch. Most of those are side works. The Holidays in Kumo book is my favorite from his side works. Giving a silent nod, Naruto opened the window in Kakashi's living room and sat up in the windowsill. Flipping open the book Kakashi mentioned, adorning a dark blue cover and an almost amateur seemingly drawn front, Naruto groaned. I just realized something. Because I haven't been home on time, I wasn't able to pay the rent for the last year. I only paid for about 3 years and a month in advance, so I am homeless again, Naruto whined, resting the back of his head against the window casing. Dropping the book onto his chest, Kakashi looked into the hallway, or more specifically a door. Well, until you figure out another living situation, I got a guest room down the hall. Feel free to use it if you want to. I don't mind having someone to help me pay the bills. I guess that's not too bad. This way I can also learn more about my parents and lineage. Plus, it'll be easier to make you be on time this way. Naruto smirked slightly while starting to read. Sweet dropping comically, Kakashi started to mentally question whether or not this was actually a good idea on his behalf. Laying his book down into his lap, Naruto pulled a paperboard-formed container out of his pocket and looked at Kakashi. Do you mind? He asked while showing the package to his sensei. Looking out of the corner of his eyes, Kakashi shrugged, sure. Before looking down into his book. Then it hit him and he pulled the book away from his face yet again. You smoke? Shrugging himself, Naruto pulled a cigarette out of its package and put it between his lips. Yeah, I know it's a bad habit and all. I started after that night I told you about, or more specifically Jiraiya had a long deep talk with me and made me try his pipe so I could feel this nicotine high as he called it. My lungs felt like they were on fire at first, but the effect was nice and I asked to try again. Before I knew it, I had bought a packet of these and have been found myself enjoying 1 or 2 while I was either down in the dumps, or doing something I like to help me relax, like reading. Look, Naruto, I've never been one to judge about those things. I know Asuma does it for similar reasons, so he can cope with this line of work and more recently because of Sandaime-sama's passing. But you, Naruto, are my student. It's bad for your health. Kakashi sighed with a tired yet concerned look. Smirking as he held up a lighter, he flicked it and lit up the end of his cigarette. Well, what can I say? There are some perks of being at the mercy of Kyuubi's healing abilities. That's a bad excuse and you know it, but who am I to judge? I read these things for the same reason. Pulling a bit of smoke into his mouth, Naruto let it cool down before inhaling it into his lungs and exhaling it. You do? He then asked, surprised, looking at his sensei by turning his head. One of my teammates died when I was on your father's team and the feeling was so unbearable I needed a distraction. Then I found one of Jiraiya-sama's books, and they made me somewhat ignore the constant images of her choking on her blood. Kakashi sighed, his eyes getting filled with sadness as he relived the memories. Looking back at the cigarette in his hand, Naruto frowned heavily with half-lidded eyes. I'm sorry, sensei. Don't be, it wasn't your fault and it's long ago now, Kakashi sighed, getting back into his book, allowing a comfortable silence to fill the room. Letting the cigarette rest between his lips, Naruto went back to reading the book Kakashi had borrowed him, and soon you could hear perverted giggles coming from both readers if you were present in the room. Finishing the tobacco-filled cylinder, Naruto flicked the remains out of the window with a sigh. So, how was my mother at Kenjutsu? That's the first thing you want to know? Kakashi asked, amused. Snorting, Naruto put a bookmark into the book and flipped it shut. Starting out simply, that's all. And well, I read her notes and all along with the stuff we found in Uzushio, but it was mostly katas and how to swing and hold a sword specifically, not really a style. Well, Uzushio was famously known for their use of fuinjutsu, so it wouldn't surprise me that they didn't have an exact kenjutsu style to perform. My former subordinate Yugao has her own sword style, using shadow clones actually. Kakashi mused, speaking softly. Sounds interesting. What about my mom? Putting his book aside as well, Kakashi sat up on the couch and stretched. She was good at it if I remember correctly, but I never saw her use an exact style as Yugao does. Why do you ask? As much as the katas and stances alone were useful, I felt like they lacked something. So I made my own personalized style to work with, and I just wanted to know if there was something I missed in those notes, that's all. Naruto explained simply, causing Kakashi to nod in understanding. Smirking under his mask, Kakashi gazed at the sheathed sword resting against the wall in the corner of the room. So, what kind of style did you make? Still trying to lure me of my trick, sensei? Naruto smirked back, causing Kakashi to sigh. Perhaps a little, but it just interests me a lot. A style is usually being made and fine-tuned over decades and generations, but you say you created your own over these 4 years. Kakashi admitted, his eyes locked onto the sword. Dropping down from the windowsill, Naruto grabbed his sword sheath and pulled the blade out of it. Jiraiya-sensei taught me a neat trick, how to train with shadow clones. In simple terms, sped up my training thousandfold, gave me more than enough time to make this style. Naruto spoke, dropping into a stance with his sword, allowing Kakashi to look at his form. Just by your stance alone, I can see you know how to use it. I'm looking quite forward to our little spar later. I want to see how good you've gotten. Kakashi smirked, standing up from the couch. Strapping the sword onto its place on his belt, Naruto swung his Heir across his shoulders and smiled. Oh, it'll be a good show. I can beat Jiraiya-sensei, remember? I want to see your skill before I believe it. It's quite a statement. Jiraiya-sama's strength is no joke. Kakashi commented, clapping his student on the back before walking out into the kitchen. Following his sensei, Naruto just smirked back at his back. Jiraiya-sensei taught me all he could, and almost ran out of things by the end of this month. Plus, I beat him in an all-out battle. Did you also get to experience Sage Mode? Kakashi asked with interest, filling a cup with water to drink. Chuckling, Naruto leaned in against the doorway, along with learning it. Yes. Do I even stand a chance? I wouldn't count on it. A few hours later, Naruto was waltzing down the streets of Konoha, curious and interested glances from the female population coming his way still, causing him to mildly blush. Have they still not figured out who I am, or do they simply not care anymore? His thoughts kept him distracted enough, so he walked into the back of someone. Hey, watch it! A feminine yell came, and Naruto blinked, getting out of his deep thoughts while turning around. I'm sorry, I was lost in thought and didn't look where I was going. He apologized, scratching the back of his head. Huffing, the woman bends down to grab what she had dropped. You should be more thoughtful of your surroundings. As the woman turned around, Naruto closed his eyes, and frowned. Yes, I know, and I'm really sorry. Naruto, is that you? The voice this time asked in a softer tone, causing Naruto to open his eyes as his eyes met the familiar form of a brunette having her hair put up into buns. Widening his eyes, Naruto smirked, chuckling as he placed a hand on his hip. Tenten. What do you know? I should have known, only you could be so careless. She giggled, smirking slightly back at the blonde. Geez, just got back after 4 years and this is the welcome I get. Naruto sweat dropped, his hand finding its way into his hair. Giggling a little louder, she waved her hands in front of her. Sorry, I was only joking. Since when did you get back? How was your trip? She asked with a smile. Well, it was good and I learned a ton. I just got back a few hours ago, debriefed my return with Jiraiya-sensei and Ba-chan before I hung out and caught up with Kakashi-sensei. Naruto explained, smiling back. Nodding her head, Tenten continued to smile. That's good. Wait, is that a sword hilt I see down there? Why does everyone seem so surprised I have a sword now? Naruto mumbled, pulling his Heir aside to show the sheath for his blade. Because no one predicted that you would return as a swordsman, duh. Predicted. Shrugging, the brunette reached down to touch the black and brown handle. Well, the rest of our age group and myself had some interesting debates about what you would have learned when you got back. I see. So what did they say? Adopting a thoughtful pose, Tenten hummed, well, there was a ton of different ideas, but Ino said something along the lines of, bigger Rasengan and more clones. Geez, so much for having faith in me. Naruto sighed, his posture dropping. Shaking her head, the brunette punched the blonde's chest. Oh, don't get all down in the dumps on me, it was meant as a joke. Sweet dropping, Naruto scratched the side of his head. Yeah, alright, well, not trying to run away from you and all, but I have a lot of people to find. I understand, I also have to get back to work. Tenten smiled, nodding her head in acceptance of his words. Got any idea where I'll find the rest of the guys? Naruto called while walking backward. Thinking for a second, Tenten snapped her fingers and yelled back, Team 8 is at their training ground, and Ino is probably at the flower shop. And watch where you're going this time. Alright, give me a break. Naruto yelled back, a mildly embarrassing blush forming on his face as he turned around and started to walk through the busy streets of Konoha. About half an hour later, Naruto gave out a yawn while slowly walking through the woods. Man, I could use a nap. Feeling a sudden burst of chakra coming his way, Naruto's eyes sprung open as he leapt back as what appeared to be a huge drill crashed into the ground in front of him, causing all dirt and debris from the impact to fly around the area. As the small cloud of dirt, splinters, and rubbish disappeared, Naruto gave a small smile as a familiar boy came into view. Sorry man, I wasn't paying attention to where I was landing. The boy apologized, as Naruto gave a short laugh. Still as unruly and brash as ever, huh, Kiba? Naruto commented, making the brown-haired boy look him up and down. Kiba's eyes narrowed as he took in the scent of this guy, along with his features before it hit him, and he took a step back in surprise while grasping onto his hair with a smirk. Well, I would be damned, Naruto, you're back. That I am. It's good to see you. Where's the rest of your team? Naruto asked curiously, walking over to give an awkward high five to his former opponent in the Chunin exam's second stage's ending fights. Smirking, Kiba rubbed his nose and chuckled, man, I couldn't recognize you at all. Only your scent gave it away. And Shino and the others are back in the clearing. I got too much power on Fang over Fang and flew all the over here. Unruly as ever, I see. Well, how have you been? Naruto chuckled along with the Inuzuka air. Screw how I have been, man, how have you been? You've been gone for what, 3 or 4 years now? I want to hear all about it. And what's with the attire? Kiba snickered, completely ignoring the remarks coming from the blonde. Scratching his head sheepishly, Naruto smiled, well, I've been all around the place. Been all over Hai no Kuni, turning every stone and leaf on my way while training to become stronger than ever. And my clothes, well, I needed something new. Sounds like fun. And you look much better in that, compared to that, kill me, orange jumpsuit. You need to go more in depth with me later, we could catch up at that ramen stand you love so much. Kiba cheered, while he started to lead Naruto over to his team. Nodding, Naruto looked at the green scenery as they walked, sure, I don't see why not. Excellent. Now tell me, how strong did you become? Kiba asked curiously, looking at the blonde from the corner of his eyes, watching him closely. Looking thoughtful over at Kiba, Naruto spoke, well, I don't want to ruin the surprise for everyone asking, so let's just let it show in a spar at some point. Naruto smirked, making Kiba smirk back at him. Deal. Akamaru and I are going to pound you into the dust. You got no idea how crazy strong we've become. Kiba boasted, pointing at his thumb as his smirk showed off his canines. Sweet dropping at the boasting, Naruto smirked to himself, man, you got no idea what's coming to you, pal. Hearing a sudden rush of rapid heavy footsteps, Naruto looked with wide eyes and a big smile as the small puppy he saw 4 years ago come running as a fully grown ninkin. No way. That can't be Akamaru. What do you mean it isn't Akamaru? Of course, it is. Yeah, but the last time I saw him you used to carry him around on your head, trust me, he's grown, a lot. Naruto smiled, stroking Akamaru's fur-covered back while scratching his ears while the large ninkin barked with glee. Kiba chuckled and looked on with his hands on his hips, Well, I suppose I don't notice as much since we're always together. Oh, trust me, Akamaru has gotten really big, and in such a short amount of time, Naruto spoke with amazement while clapping Akamaru's back before walking again. A few minutes later they entered the clearing Kiba's team were in, and Kiba roared up pointing Naruto's direction, "Hey guys. Look who the cat decided to drag in." Feeling like sighing, Naruto turned his gaze into the clearing as he watched people turn their gazes his way. "Long time no see. I felt you coming, Naruto. My bugs sensed your chakra about a mile away," Shino responded in his usual monotone voice. His attire had changed so drastically that Naruto wouldn't have recognized him if he hadn't called out first. Smiling awkwardly, Naruto tensed up at the sight of a bug on his shoulder. "Nice to see you too, Shino. You've grown, Naruto. You look much more mature and like an adult now." The soft tone of Team 8's sense came from his left, and Naruto turned to look at the beautiful red-eyed woman with a smile. Smirking lightly, Naruto decided to play around a bit and gently grabbed her hand to kiss the back of it. "And you look just as youthful and beautiful as ever, Kurenai-sensei." Blushing a mild red, Kurenai smiled. "I see that you returned as a gentleman as well. It's good to see that you at least grew up over these years." Kurenai chuckled, giving a discreet glance in Kiba's direction, causing the Inuzuka heir to blush lightly due to embarrassment. But of course, a man should learn how to properly act toward the female sex. Naruto smiled and let go of Kurenai's hand, completely ignoring Kiba's death threats in the background for being so inappropriate toward his sensei. "A lot of men could learn from you." Kurenai giggled with a hand up to her mouth. Smirking lightly to himself, Naruto mentally thanked Jiraiya for teaching him a couple of useful things about women among the countless useless things. "On my trip, I learned most things, but genjutsu was sadly not part of them. Perhaps you could give me some private lessons sometime." "Oi, knock it off, Naruto. Stop being like that toward Kurenai-sensei." Kiba roared out, attempting to punch Blonde in the back of the head. But Naruto sensed it miles away and sidestepped and put out his leg to make Kiba trip and fall onto the grass face first. Kurenai found the scene amusing as she answered, "Trying to hit on me, Naruto. But if you mean it, I could give you a few lessons regarding genjutsu if you would like." "Sounds great. 8 o'clock at your place tomorrow." Naruto smirked, finding Kiba's continuous death threats and attempts at attacking him hilarious as he dodged around the brunette, maintaining eye contact with Kurenai. Shaking her head, Kurenai giggled while writing down her address. "Sure, but it is strictly for professional purposes. But of course, I need to learn about genjutsu and I got a few theories to run through you," Naruto remarked with a smile, making Kurenai nod in acceptance. "Now, I believe someone is eager to say hello." Kurenai chuckled, nodding her head in the direction beside her. Looking in the direction she was referring to, Naruto smiled as he took in the grown form of the Hyuga clan's oldest heiress. "Hinata. It's been ages. How are you?" Naruto-kun," she stuttered, causing Naruto to raise a brow as he tilted his head. Opening his mouth he spoke, "Yeah, it's me. Welcome home," she squeaked out, nodding her head down as her face turned scarlet red, even more red than his mother's hair he had seen in pictures. Putting a hand on her forehead, Naruto asked with concern, "You're burning up, you sick or something?" Feeling the blonde's hand on her forehead, Hinata started stuttering random words before she passed out onto the forest floor. "That's never going to stop, is it?" Naruto remarked with a chuckle. Kiba whistled and shook his head before punching the blonde's shoulder. "You still denser than a rock, aren't ya? Haven't you figured out that Hinata likes me?" Naruto finished with a mildly bored look, causing Kiba and Kurenai to go wide-eyed at him, as Shino rose a single curious brow. Grabbing his head in disbelief, Kiba took a step back. "You know?" "Yeah, well, as said, I learned about women on my trip as well. Made a lot of sense, a shit ton more clear about why Hinata is acting this way." Naruto sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Kiba smacked his forehead and nudged the blonde's arm with his elbow. "Then stop poor Hinata's suffering. Ask her out already." "I'll pass," Naruto simply remarked. "Huh? What do you mean you'll pass? What's wrong with dating Hinata?" Kiba roared out, suddenly attempting to strange the blonde for being a bastard. Pushing Kiba off him, Naruto snorted, Nothing is wrong with Hinata. Okay. I just don't feel the same way as she does, it's that simple. You'll have to let her know at some point then, having her being hopeful is not fair to her, Kurenai mentioned, joining the conversation. Sighing, Naruto leaned back to look up at the blue skies with clouds and birds passing above him. I know, but I don't want to be rude about it, so I need to figure out the right way to approach it. Just don't wait too long, she's already been feeling like this for years, Kurenai sighed, causing Naruto to frown with a slow nod. I will eventually, but for now I'll have to leave. I still got a handful of people to visit before sundown, Naruto remarked, earning him a couple of nods in return. Sighing loudly to himself, Naruto had a mental conversation with himself about how he would break the news to Hinata. She was a good friend, and she didn't deserve the pain that would come her way, but keeping her in the dark was way too cruel of an act to do to her. Who am I kidding? The moment I talk to her she'll faint, but it would be so nice to have someone like Kurenai deliver the message for me either, Naruto mumbled in defeat, running a hand through his spiky sun-kissed locks. Oh well, I'll just take it as it. He was suddenly interrupted as a loud battle cry came from his left, a blur racing through the woods along with it. Narrowing his eyes, Naruto felt himself smirking as he closed his eyes completely, spreading his feet out while crouching down. He focused on the sound, bringing the palm of his hand up. Springtime of Youth's dynamic entry, was the green blur's cry, while it came flying through into the clearing at high speeds, legs stretched out as it connected with Naruto's palm, sending a huge shockwave from the impact everywhere, cracking the ground and splintering the bark of the trees around them. Smirking a little wider as he kept his ground, Naruto felt himself getting pushed a few feet back in the dirt, his toes and part of his feet slightly digging into the ground before he opened his sharp blue eyes. You say something, Lee. Using the blonde's palm to backflip down onto the ground, the bushy-browed teen gave a large grin of amazement as he watched his blonde friend and rival almost effortlessly block his attack in a matter of seconds. As expected of my recently returned rival. Your flames of youth burn brighter than ever before. Your youth burning so brightly you cast a large shadow over the sun with your endless youth spirit. Lee roared out with flames in his eyes as he pumped his fist to the sky. Rubbing his ears comically, Naruto chuckled dryly, could you keep it down? I think I have hearing damage. Of course, my rival. But first, we must have a youthful spar to make up for the last 4 unyouthful years without a chance to do so. Fight me, Lee yelled, getting into a taijutsu stance, letting out yet another battle cry, the flames in his eyes intensifying by the second. Looking tiredly at the other boy, Naruto's shoulders slumped down as he lamely replied. No. The lame answer made Lee lose his stance before he face planted into the ground, but not a second later he was standing up, waving his arms around in the air dramatically. What do you mean no? Lee yelled out in outrage. Listen, Lee, I would love to spar with you, but I have a spar later on tonight where the Hokage has to attend, so she can determine whether or not I'm living up to my sensei's praising of how strong I've become, Naruto said as an excuse, but truthfully he was just avoiding the endless fight he'd find himself in if he said yes to the energetic green-clad boy. As Lee was about to answer with yet another youthful reply, another green blur crashed into the ground next to them. Kakashi. My eternal, I could have sworn I heard Kakashi's hypnus around here. Unable to keep his calm, Naruto started snickering at the sight. You say something too, bushy-brows sensei. Adopting a thinking position, Guy rubbed the top of his looking this young man over and over around 1,000,000 times. Blonde hair, blue eyes, whisker marks, who are you, young man? Quite unyouthful of you to forget one of Kakashi's students, Guy-sensei, Naruto replied with a facepalm. Slapping the bottom of his fist into the palm of his hand, a light bulb seemed to light up in Guy's head. Oh ho. If it isn't, Naruto. It seems like you've finally returned from your youthful journey with our even more youthful Jiraiya-sama. Welcome back, Naruto. The stoic and slightly monotone greeting coming from the latest arrival. Taking a step to the right, Naruto gave a small smile as he looked at the stoic Hyuga prodigy making his presence known while walking up beside his sensei. Neji, it's good to see you. Likewise, Naruto, I hope your training was fruitful. Neji nodded back, crossing his arms across his chest. Naruto gave a short chuckle as he touched his haori, Seems like everyone around here got a wardrobe change, aside from Lee and Guy-sensei. Naruto replied cheekily. A small smirk formed on Neji's lips as he closed his eyes and nodded slowly. Indeed, but some things are meant to stay as they are. Yeah, I guess you're right. Hell would be freezing over if they decided to change those jumpsuits. Naruto laughed out loud, palming his forehead. Guy and Lee sulked side by side as they mumbled about unyouthful comments. Shaking his head at his team's antics, Neji changed his focus back to Naruto. You look well, the new clothes is a nice sight for sore eyes. Hey, I get that a lot. And as much as I hate to admit it, the orange was getting out of control. Naruto sweat dropped, as Neji just chuckled with a small nod in agreement. Lee seemed to get out of his sulking mood at that time, and asked curiously, so, Naruto, now that you are back, what are your plans? I have tons of goals as it seems, some are a bit too delicate for me to just openly discuss them, but, I still plan on getting through to Sasuke one way or another. I just don't plan on being a naive idiot about it anymore. Was the blonde's sad answer. Nodding his head in acceptance, Lee looked down frowning at the mention of Sasuke. He is still from Konoha, so for old time's sake we owe him to try. Looking up at the skies, noticing how it's starting to get dark, Naruto winced lightly. He had been talking so much with his friends that it was getting dark by now. Sorry to cut this meeting so short, but I have a spar to attend to. Orders by the Hokage, I'm afraid. That's quite alright. Remember to show your springtime of youth. Let your flames burn brighter than ever before, and use them to claim a sweet victory. Guy roared out, flames in his eyes as the ground cracked beneath him from his intensity. Nodding with a large sweat drop, Naruto waved his hands and bid his farewells to the trio before he shunshined away from the area. Landing gracefully on his feet in a slightly crouched down position, Naruto stands up straight while moving some hair out of his face. Dusk had claimed the lands around him, and his company for the evening had already arrived. His sensei stood and calmly chatted with his pink-haired teammate, while his mentor over the past 4 years was up to the same old. Annoying Tsunade enough for her to punch him across the clearing. You're late, Gaki, was the sudden call of Tsunade, and Naruto rubbed his head sheepishly while looking toward the busty Hokage. Giving a quiet shrug, he got a seemingly brilliant idea. Sorry about that, I got lost on the road of life. As those words left his mouth, Kakashi almost fainted with pride as Tsunade's hair shadowed her eyes. If you ever say that again, I'll punch you to Iowa and start a new war with you as the messenger. You said something. Naruto chuckled, making Kakashi cry tears of joy as Tsunade raged beyond belief. Okay, that's it, she roared out, trying to swing a fist toward the smug blonde before she was grabbed around the stomach by Jiraiya. Jiraiya clutched around Tsunade's stomach as the blonde Hokage kicked and punched out into the air. We got a spar to watch, please refrain yourself from trying to kill him until after. After Tsunade seemed to calm down, Naruto and Sakura were placed side by side in front of Kakashi with around 50 feet between them. Show me what you learned, Naruto. Sakura, it's been too long since the last spar, Kakashi said quietly with a small smirk gracing his mask-covered lips. Tsunade clapped her hands from the sidelines, standing beside Jiraiya as she spoke. Alright, listen up. This match will go like a fight in the Chunin exams finals. Winners will be determined by either knockout or interference by myself or Jiraiya. Begin, she called, and the two Sannin shunshined away behind some trees and bushes in the distance. Get ready for a show. I present you the new and reformed Naruto Uzumaki, get ready for getting blown away. Jiraiya exclaimed proudly, making Tsunade sweat drop. He's standing still. Jiraiya smirked lightly and leaned against a tree. Winners aren't determined by who makes the first move. They are determined by who is the last one standing. The mask-clad Junin watched quietly as he lifted his headband to show his implanted Sharingan to his two students, going to stand there all day. Kakashi remarked calmly, and Naruto shrugged while looking toward his pink-haired teammate. Sharingan right from the start, Kakashi-sensei isn't playing today. Naruto remarked to himself before opening his mouth slightly. You want the honors? He asked with a small smile, making Sakura smirk with a nod. Rushing forward at speeds that Naruto noticed was faster than 4 years ago, Sakura pulled back her fist as she threw her first punch downward, which Kakashi backflipped up into a tree to avoid. Shanaru. She screamed at the top of her lungs as her fist connected with the ground. It all but exploded into large chunks of dirt and rocks, a large cloud made out of dust, dirt, and splinters rising after impact. Kakashi gulped loudly, as he watched wide-eyed down at Sakura, who was smirking widely at her performance before she leapt up after her sensei, knocking over trees and splintering their trunks as he desperately tried to get a punch in. I know Sakura has improved greatly and I'm proud of that, but if I have to be fairly honest, you are the one I'm most curious about, Naruto, so show me what you got. Kakashi thought to himself with narrowed eyes as he flipped over Sakura, using her back as a springboard to fly toward his blonde student. Naruto, watch out. He's coming for you. Sakura yelled out, swirling around on her feet as she sprinted after her sensei as fast as her legs could carry her. Kakashi spun around midair as he flew past Naruto, landing on his feet effortlessly while flipping a kunai into his hand. He held the tip against the blonde's back. I remember you saying you weren't cocky and overconfident, was that all just a lie? No, I'm a man of my word. Naruto chuckled as he popped into a cloud of smoke, making Kakashi's eyes widen in realization. It had been a clone all along. Kakashi quickly leapt away, landing in a crouched down position with his kunai held up in front of him as he scanned in the area around him. He made a clone, but when? Kakashi mused to himself, but then suddenly remembered the moment of distraction where his field of vision was blocked by the result of Sakura's destructive fist. He acts fast now, and definitely more strategized. He used my moment of distraction to hide and used Sakura as a distraction to do so, rather cold but efficient, but smart. Speaking of Sakura, Kakashi continued within his thoughts, sidestepping as Sakura appeared beside him, kicking toward the former Anbu captain's head. Quickly ducking, Kakashi raced through hand seals at a speed only he could, and slammed his palms onto the ground. Sorry about this. He comically smiled, while a mud wall sprung out of the ground, throwing her high up into the air. Launching himself off the ground after his pink-haired student, Kakashi held his kunai up with a glint in his eyes. This should draw him out. Naruto would never let his comrades down. As he neared his female student, Kakashi's Sharingan caught movement to his left in the form of flying projectiles. Quickly turning around midair, he deflected the incoming spinning shuriken with his kunai, leaving Sakura enough time to land on a branch, and leap up against after her sensei for payback. I got you now, sensei. She yelled, slamming her fist into his chest with such force an imprint could be seen in his back before he burst into smoke, revealing a log shattering to splinters in his place. Substitution, she remarked, landing on the ground looking hectically around to find her sensei. Shanaru, he managed to separate us, so that was Kakashi sensei's play all along. Sakura realized, giving into a sprint to find and help her blonde teammate out. About 5 minutes away, Kakashi flew past the dark forests at high speeds following a colorful blur speeding across the ground. You revealed your position with those shuriken. I knew you wouldn't just stand by and abandon her. As Naruto finally slowed down in front of a large lake, he gave into a halt at the shore and turned around as Kakashi landed right in front of him, kunai drawn up as he took his battle stance. You know, you might have thought you were the one outsmarting me by forcing my hand to help Sakura, but you played into my trap all along, Naruto remarked, crouching down into his own stance. Kakashi narrowed his eyes at that. Had he already seen through his plan before he executed it? What do you mean, Naruto? It's like you expected me to pull that in order to lure you out. I did. Ever since the fight started, your normal eye might have been on Sakura, but that Sharingan was primarily focused on me. Until Sakura took care of the distraction I needed at least. Naruto smirked widely. Chuckling lightly, Kakashi grabbed his kunai tighter. How could you possibly have known Sakura had learned that technique from Tsunade? You just got back. Simple. She tried to punch me when I got back. Sweet dropping at his answer, Kakashi shook his head with a proud smile beneath his mask. Naruto had gotten smarter and more strategizing over the past 4 years. This was indeed going to be interesting, perhaps even fun. Still, how is this a trap? Naruto responded by grinning wickedly. his hands flying through hand seals at a pace that could almost match Kakashi's. You seem to forget one important fact, Sensei. You should never follow the enemy to where he has a home field advantage. With his eyes widening in realization, Kakashi quickly ran through a series of hand seals on his own as he stared at the blonde with great intensity. So, he's a water user. Finishing his seals by ending it with the dragon seal, Naruto called out, Sweryuden no Jutsu. Water release. Water dragon jutsu. As he called out his move, a large pillar of water flew out of the lake behind him, spinning around as it took the shape of a dragon flying at high speeds at Kakashi. Doden. Taju Doryuheki. Earth release. Multi-mud walls. Kakashi cried out, slamming his hands so hard on the ground he could as a high amount of earth barriers shot out of the ground in front of him a mere moment before they were all but one was mercilessly torn down by Naruto's attack. Kakashi panted hard as he stood behind the first wall he created, the wall nothing but rubbish now as he was drenched with water. Close call, but now it's my turn. He called out quietly, flipping over the remaining rubbish of his earlier technique, rushing across the forest floor as he got ready for a close-up fight. Naruto seeing this smirked quietly and rushed toward his sensei to meet him in the middle, their fists clashing together as they spun around each other, engaging in a heavy taijutsu battle where they exchanged blows at a speed shocking Tsunade greatly. Naruto was matching Kakashi perfectly at the moment, not even looking tired. Perhaps Jiraiya was right. After a few minutes of endless punches and kicks getting exchanged, Naruto swirled over Kakashi, placing his arm in a lock as he yelled out, "Do it now." And a pink blur flew up from the ground beneath them. Quickly letting himself fall onto his knees, Kakashi leaned back with his arm still in a lock as he watched Sakura's bone-shattering fist fly over his head. Sliding onto his side, wincing as his arm starts to hurt from the twisting, he in a hurry places a kick in Sakura's gut to send her flying at high speeds into a tree. As Sakura was dealt with for the moment, Kakashi used his leg to try and sweep the blonde off his legs, but having seen it coming to him, Naruto lets go of Kakashi's arms and backflips a few feet away. Sakura, who had recently recovered, took her stance beside Naruto, panting heavily while wondering how in the world the blonde couldn't be tired at all. His Sharingan is trouble, he anticipates my moves before I even make them, how should we go about this? I could have ended it moments ago, but I'm not here to win, I'm here to show my progress. Ending the fight in unnecessary haste wouldn't do me any good. Naruto chuckled sheepishly, making Sakura gawk at him while Kakashi's eyes narrowed dangerously as he read the blonde's lips with his Sharingan. He claims to have been able to end this, but when and how would he have had such an opportunity? He also hasn't used his sword yet, and I'm curiously enough to admit that I want to see his use of it. Kakashi thought to himself as he tried to keep his calm, his analyzing eye swirling around with anticipation. What do you mean you could have ended it? I haven't seen an opening whatsoever. Sakura yelled out, a throbbing tick mark on her forehead from her temper. Naruto scoffed lightly with a loud ringing in his ears, if you know how to, you can create one, and I've had many opportunities so far, but as stated I need to show enough for Ba-chan to forgive me on being late. Sakura wasn't delighted but nodded nonetheless with a tired sigh, fine, but extending so much we could lose, wouldn't look great either. Oh, I agree, no worries, hence why I plan to end it soon, Naruto smirked devilishly. Frowning at his words, Sakura said, we are supposed to work together, it's a team fight. I know, I'm not that dumb, and I do need our teamwork for something, Naruto chuckled, leaning over while whispering into Sakura's ear, covering his lips from Kakashi's prying eye with his hand. Sakura smirked lightly at his plan, though wondering slightly if it would work. I can definitely do that, but to catch him off guard would require you to move quite fast, she whispered back, shielding her mouth from work too. Oh, I definitely can, Naruto grinned as he suddenly pushed Sakura out of the way, leaping back a moment later as Kakashi flew through between them. In a fight, there is usually not this much talking. He called out after landing on his feet, pulling a handful of kunai out of thin air before throwing them at the duo. Sakura was quick to move in, slamming her fist into the ground to pull a huge boulder-sized chunk of rocks and dirt out of the ground to shield them from the incoming kunai. Racing around the boulder at speeds that made Sakura's eyes widen slightly, Naruto raced toward Kakashi with a hand grabbed around the sheath to his sword. Alright sensei, you wanted to see it, so here it goes. He smirked to himself, pushing the blade free of the sheath with his thumb against the crossguard. Watching this move with great interest, Kakashi flipped a kunai into his hand and charged at Naruto while watching intense eyes. As they were about 20 feet apart, Kakashi heard Sakura's familiar phrase from his left. Before he had enough time to react, he gulped with wide eyes as he watched the Pinkett throw 3 whole trees toward them. Tsunade watched with great interest as the trees blocked the path and view between Kakashi and Naruto, but it was not the trees getting her attention. No, it was the thing flowing from Naruto's sword as he pulled it out of his sheath completely. Jiraiya, what is that? Jiraiya smirked widely and swung an arm around Tsunade's shoulders, pointing his hand forward as he spoke proudly, Naruto's first and completely unique style of his creation. Let me introduce you to his kenjutsu, better known as Mizu no Kokyu. Breath of water. Naruto's face turned completely concentrated as he pulled his sword high into the air and whispered, Ichi no Kata, Manamo Jiri. First form. Water surface slash. As he called out his attack, water flowed freely from his sword as you could hear the metal ringing from the chakra infusing. Using his fast momentum, Naruto brought down his sword in a straight slash, cutting effortlessly through the trees in his path in a mere second before he flew past Kakashi's frozen form. Standing completely still behind Kakashi, not moving a muscle as the water chakra faded from his sword, Naruto started counting down inside his head. Kakashi, who had been too shocked by the view that had appeared after Naruto had entered his vision again, stood idly by and looked himself over. Did he miss? And as those thoughts crossed his mind, the loud sound of fabric getting torn met his ears as a nice clean cut appeared in his mask covering his neck, but the slice hadn't been deep enough to cut through his skin. What the hell was he thinking? Had he not been 100% accurate in that attack, he could have cut Kakashi's head off. Tsunade raged, but the amazement she had on her face from what she just witnessed was quickly killing her anger down. Jiraiya gave her a reassuring smile and came to his student's defense. Naruto didn't even hit him with his blade as he normally would, it was the water flowing from the sword doing the trick. Look, you can see the mask slightly soaked around the area, he never even came close with the actual blade. Still, it was a risky move. Exactly. How else was he supposed to show how good he had gotten? Such display of skill and ability, along with strategy and masterclass teamwork with Sakura, should count for a lot. Jiraiya yelled out, smiling wider and wider with each word escaping his lips. Tsunade sighed in defeat, smiling lightly after, it indeed does, so what rank? Huh. Tsunade snorted and smirked, it would be shameful for our ranks and village to keep him a genin after that show. He defeated Kakashi without even sweating the slightest. Neither of the parts might have gone all out, but I still stand strong behind my words. It would be a shameful decision to leave him a genin. Well, this is my honest opinion, Jiraiya started, as the two looked back at the remains of Team 7. As Kakashi's brain fully figured out what had happened, he lightly touched the place at his neck as turns around to look at Naruto casually sheathing his sword with a grin. I suppose that means you won. Kushina-sama would have been very proud of the swordsman you've become. Naruto's eyes widened at that, as he started to tear up slightly. Thank you, sensei. He muttered, wiping a stray tear away as Sakura joined them. Naruto, what the hell was that? I have never seen anything like it, she roared out, torn in between being mad at him for nearly chopping their sensei's head off, and being amazed at the sudden kenjutsu showcase. Of course you haven't. Naruto apparently created it himself, Tsunade said as she and Jiraiya walked up to them. Sakura's eyes widened further as she looked at the blonde while slowly turning your head as he sheepishly answered, that's right. Took a few years to work it out completely without the former flaws, but it was definitely worth it. Before the Pinkett had time to answer, Tsunade cut in with a cough to her hand, alright, well, Jiraiya and I have been discussing and congratulations Naruto. With your display of skill in not only kenjutsu but also taijutsu, ninjutsu, and strategy along with your show of teamwork, you'll no longer serve the village as a genin. You'll now serve the village with your new rank of Junin. Congratulations Gaki, continue to make your village proud. J. Junin. Sakura stuttered and promptly fainted, while Kakashi gave a proud eye smile as he put his headband back in place. Naruto himself stood with wide eyes and a gaping mouth. Why you serious? Yes, of course. By all means, you should have been Chunin after your show at the last Chunin exams you participated in, along with your show of skill in the invasion. Take this promotion as a thank you and apology as well, you shouldn't have stayed genin for so long. Tsunade explained, smirking widely at the blonde's beyond shocked and surprised expression as he comically opened and shut his mouth without being able to mouth a single word. Naruto finally found himself able to speak again, and bowed lightly while scratching his head. Thank you Hokage-sama, I won't let you down. Tech. Saying Ba-chan suits you better Gaki, Tsunade mumbled with a small blush, making Kakashi chuckle at his Hokage until she sent him a death glare. Jiraiya shook his head and appeared beside his student with an arm swung across his shoulders. Well, I believe this calls for celebration.